You should never buy these 9 clothing brands. And I don't mean because they're ugly. I mean because once you know what's been alleged or documented behind the scenes, the labor issues, the environmental damage, the toxic materials concerns, the straight-up corporate nonsense, you might not be able to look at that cute bargain the same way again. Most people shop based on 3 things: price, style, and vibes. If it looks good and it's affordable, it goes in the cart. But the truth is, some brands are cheap for reasons you wouldn't willingly agree to if you saw the full story. And that matters, because this isn't just about fashion. It's about what's touching your skin, what you're funding with your money, and what kind of system you're accidentally feeding every time you click checkout. So today we're doing a countdown: 9 clothing brands you should avoid. And then, because I'm not here to leave you stressed, 5 brands that are generally safer to wear and support, with a few smart tips so you can shop without feeling like you need a PhD in supply chains. Stay to the end, because number 1 is the most shocking, and one of the safe brands might surprise you. Number 9, Shein. Picture this. It's 1 a.m., you're scrolling, and Shein is basically whispering, "Go on, it's only $6. One top becomes $5, $5 becomes $15, and because it's so cheap, your brain goes into this dangerous mode where you stop asking questions and start collecting parcels like it's a hobby. But then you hear what happened in the UK, and the vibe changes. UK lawmakers asked Shein a very simple yes or no question. Do you use cotton from Xinjiang in China? That matters because Xinjiang has been linked to major forced labor allegations. But instead of just answering clearly, Shein's representative kept dodging the question, and it immediately made people wonder what they're trying not to say. Then there's the part that feels way more personal. What's actually in the clothes you're wearing? A group in Germany tested a bunch of Shein items and said 18 out of 56 had chemical levels that were too high under EU rules. That's the kind of thing that makes you look at your own closet and go, wait, have I been wearing something sketchy this whole time? And then, just weeks ago, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton announced an investigation into Shein, looking into concerns including unethical labor practices and the sale of unsafe consumer products. So when I say avoid, I'm not trying to be dramatic for fun. I'm saying this brand has enough smoke around it, evasive answers, chemical findings, active investigations, that the cheap price starts to feel less like a deal and more like a warning label. And if Shein is the too cheap to be true story, number 8 is the one that looks glamorous, trendy, influencer approved, but has a very ugly labor trail. Number 8, Fashion Nova. Fashion Nova is the friend who shows up yelling, "New outfit, new era!" It's built for photos, quick trends, and that feeling of instant transformation. The clothes look bold online, the price feels irresistible, and the whole brand runs on speed-fast drops, fast shipping, fast hype. But here's the part people don't see. The speed has a human cost. A major investigation reported that US Labor Department findings tied Fashion Nova's supply chain to Los Angeles area factories where workers were allegedly underpaid. Factories, owing millions in back wages to workers. In that reporting, contractors making Fashion Nova garments were found to owe about $3.8 million, and some workers were reported earning as little as $2 an hour. And this is where brands love to play innocent. Fashion Nova didn't run the factories directly. It ordered through vendors who used contractors. And Fashion Nova argued it wasn't responsible for what contractors did. But imagine being the person behind the sewing machine. Your rent is real, your groceries are real, your paycheck is tiny. Meanwhile, the brand is exploding online, going viral, and selling the outfit you bought for your birthday night out. That's why Fashion Nova lands on the never wear list, not because the clothes can't look good, because the business model rewards maximum output at minimum cost. And when the labor side of the story gets that ugly, it stops being just fashion. It becomes a choice. Now, if these first 2 already made you uncomfortable, good, because number 7 is way more mainstream and people wear it every day without realizing the baggage that comes with it. Number 7, Boohoo. Let's talk about Boohoo, because this one is the definition of it looks cute online, but the story behind it is not cute at all. Back in 2020, a UK newspaper investigation alleged really grim working conditions and illegal underpay in Leicester factories linked to Boohoo's supply chain. Boohoo then commissioned an independent review, and that review didn't come back with a "nothing to see here" vibe. It was basically like, yes, there were serious issues, and the company had major failures in how it monitored what was happening. And here's why people put Boohoo on the never wear list. The business model is built on speed. Constant drops, constant pressure. And when the pressure is make it cheaper, make it faster, somebody always gets squeezed, usually the workers who can least afford it. Then there's the eco angle, and this is where it gets messy. Some of these brands love using green-sounding words and labels that make you feel like you're making a responsible choice. But the UK's consumer watchdog looked into the way ASOS, Boohoo, and George at Asda were talking about their sustainable products, and it pushed them to change how they make those claims so they're clearer and not misleading. Basically, don't slap green on something unless you can prove it. And don't use vague wording that makes shoppers think a product is better for the planet than it really is. So, if you've ever bought Boohoo thinking it's just a cheap outfit, that's why people warn against it. It's not just fabric, it's a system. And if Boohoo is the fast fashion with receipts situation, number 6 is the brand people swear is more elevated, but the controversies keep showing up anyway. Number 6, Zara. Zara is the brand that makes people feel like they're doing fast fashion, but with better taste. Like, I'm not shopping cheap, I'm shopping European. And that's exactly why it's so sneaky, because the price tags and clean stores make people assume the ethics are cleaner too. But Zara has had some very uncomfortable moments that pulled the curtain back. One of the most haunting examples? In 2017, workers linked to a supplier in Turkey reportedly slipped notes into Zara clothing, saying, basically, I made this item, but I didn't get paid. Zara's parent company, Inditex, responded by helping create a hardship fund to compensate affected workers. That's not a normal oops. That's the kind of story that makes you stare at your receipt differently. And even on the front of house side, the part customers actually see, Zara hasn't been immune to worker unrest. Reuters reported that Zara workers in Spain planned protests in 2024, demanding better benefits after Inditex announced record profits. So here's why Zara lands on the avoid list. It's not because every item is evil, it's because the brand runs on speed, volume, and relentless trend churn. And that kind of machine keeps generating labor controversies. The aesthetic is polished. The supply chain stories? Not always. Now, number 5 is where things get even more. How is this still allowed? Because it's a brand that's been dragged again and again over what's allegedly happening behind the scenes. Number 5, Uniqlo. Uniqlo is the brand you buy when you want your life to feel calmer than it actually is. You grab a plain tee, a puffer jacket, some socks, and suddenly you're cosplaying as organized adult who meal preps. It's clean, simple, and it feels safe. But then the cotton question shows up, and the whole vibe changes. For a while now, there's been a huge argument in fashion about cotton connected to Xinjiang in China, because that region has been linked to serious forced labor allegations. And most brands treat the topic like it's radioactive. They either stay vague or avoid it completely. Uniqlo mostly stayed quiet too, until their parent company's CEO reportedly told the BBC they don't use cotton from Xinjiang, and that one statement set off a major backlash in China with boycott calls. That's what makes this whole thing so messy. You and I just want a basic hoodie, but behind that hoodie is a global supply chain where brands are trying to keep customers happy, keep governments happy, and keep business running. And sometimes they're careful about what they say because they don't want a public fight. And it doesn't stop at internet drama. Rights groups in France filed complaints accusing some fashion companies of benefiting from Uyghur forced labor, and Uniqlo and its parent company has been among the brands named in that larger push. So Uniqlo isn't on this list because every item is automatically bad. It's here because it shows how a simple, clean, basics brand can still be tied up in a supply chain story that's way more serious than the calm, beige store vibe suggests. And if Uniqlo is the brand that sells you calm while the cotton conversation stays chaotic, number 4 is the brand that sells you values on billboards, and then reportedly fights the rules meant to protect them. Number 4, Nike. Nike sells motivation in a swoosh. It's just do it. rise and grind. You're unstoppable. All wrapped around shoes that make people feel like they're one workout away from a new personality. But here's the uncomfortable part. When governments try to clamp down on forced labor supply chains, it's not always the obviously shady companies pushing back. Sometimes it's the biggest names, the ones you grew up trusting. Reports have said major companies, including Nike, were lobbying around the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, a US bill designed to block imports tied to forced labor in Xinjiang, unless companies can prove their supply chains are clean. Now, pause on what that means in human language. Lawmakers are trying to make it harder for forced labor-linked goods to enter stores, and brands that rely on complex global supply chains may try to influence how strict those rules become. Because strict rules can slow down business, raise costs, and force uncomfortable changes. Nike has denied using forced labor and has said it doesn't source from Xinjiang, but the lobbying reports still leave people with a bad taste. Because even if a brand says the right things publicly, shoppers notice what it does when money is on the line. That's why Nike lands on the avoid side in this kind of list. It's not about one pair of shoes. It's about the bigger pattern, a powerful brand, a risky global supply chain topic, and a lot of smoke around accountability. Next up, number 3 gets even more mainstream and way harder for people to quit. Number 3, H&M. Imagine you're cleaning out your closet. You've got a bag of clothes you barely wore, and you tell yourself, at least I'm donating, at least someone else can use it. It feels responsible, like you're doing the right thing. Now zoom out to Ghana. In June 2025, investigators reported that discarded clothes from UK consumers, including items from brands like H&M, were found dumped in protected wetlands near the Densu Delta, an area that's supposed to be a safe habitat for wildlife, including endangered turtles. The haunting part is how ordinary it sounds. Clothes washing up along riverbanks, piling up in places that are not landfills, not recycling centers, just nature being used like a trash can. And it's not because Ghanaians want more clothes. Ghana receives an overwhelming amount of secondhand clothing every week, and a big chunk of it is so low quality it can't even be sold, meaning it turns into waste almost immediately. So the donation you pictured as a second life can become somebody else's daily cleanup job, somebody else's polluted water, somebody else's blocked drains and ruined fishing nets. That's why H&M lands on this avoid list. Not because every H&M item is evil, but because the fast fashion volume game creates a mountain of leftovers. And that mountain doesn't disappear. It just lands somewhere else, on someone else's doorstep, in a place that never agreed to be your closet's landfill. And if H&M is the cheap haul that becomes a global waste story, number 2 is about the people who actually make the gear we trust with our bodies. Number 2, Adidas. Picture an Adidas ad. Sweat, grit, victory music, someone sprinting like their life depends on it. Now cut to a factory floor in Myanmar, where the story looks very different. In 2025, reports said thousands of workers at a major Adidas supplier in Yangon went on strike demanding higher wages. People earning the equivalent of under $2 a day asking for a raise just to keep up with reality. That's the part that hits you in the chest. The brand sells performance and motivation, but the workers behind the product are fighting for basics. And it's not just one moment. The Clean Clothes campaign has documented ongoing concerns at Adidas's Myanmar supplier Puchen, including a large strike by workers demanding better conditions and the right to unionize, followed by reports of union busting and retaliation. Business and Human Rights Resource Center also compiled reports around protests and alleged dismissals at Adidas-linked suppliers in Myanmar after workers pushed for higher pay and better treatment. Now, Adidas does talk about monitoring suppliers and engagement. But here's the human reality. If workers keep reaching the point where they have to strike just to be heard, something in the system is still failing. That's why Adidas is number 2. When you wear the logo, you're wearing a story. And right now, parts of that story include workers risking their jobs to ask for wages and rights that should have been non-negotiable in the first place. Number 1, ASOS. ASOS is the store you open when you don't want to think. You just want options. 50 pages of options. Cute tops, party dresses, main character boots, and a checkout that makes it way too easy to pretend this is self-care. And here's why ASOS lands at number 1. It doesn't just sell clothes, it sells trust. It sells the feeling that everything on the site has been curated, like someone responsible already did the homework for you. That's why the sustainability angle hits so hard. ASOS had the responsible edit vibe. the kind of label that makes shoppers relax and think, okay, this one is the better choice. But the UK's Competition and Markets Authority investigated ASOS, along with other fast fashion retailers, over green marketing that could mislead shoppers. And in March 2024, the CMA secured formal commitments from ASOS to change how it describes and markets those green claims so they're clearer and more accurate. In normal people language, a regulator basically said, stop using vague eco-language that makes people think a product is greener than it really is. And it's not just labels. ASOS has also faced scrutiny around supply chain ethics, including reports that it flagged a UK supplier as red critical in an ethical audit during the COVID period, meaning urgent risk issues had been identified. So ASOS is number one because it shows how the whole system works. The site makes shopping feel effortless, but the impact isn't effortless, and the truth can be buried under cute names, trendy edits, and a filter that does the thinking for you. Now take a breath, because I promised I wouldn't leave you stressed and guilty. After 9 brands to avoid, we're switching gears to the good news. 5 brands that are generally safer to wear. Not perfect, but better. Clearer supply chains, stronger standards, and fewer red flags hiding behind the marketing. Let's get into the safe list. Safe Brand 1. Patagonia. Patagonia is one of the rare brands that doesn't act like your closet is supposed to restart every season. Their whole vibe is basically buy less, keep it longer. And they actually build their business around that idea instead of just saying it for marketing. Here's what makes Patagonia feel safer. They put real effort into making clothes that last, and they actively encourage repairs instead of replacements. They run worn wear, which is essentially a system where you can repair, trade in, and buy used Patagonia pieces instead of tossing them. That alone is huge, because the biggest problem with most clothing brands isn't one evil thing, it's the endless cycle of buying, wearing twice, and throwing away. Patagonia also talks openly about where things are made and how they're trying to improve working conditions. You don't have to be an expert to understand the difference. Some brands hide behind pretty ads. Patagonia tends to show you the messy process and admit what still needs work. So if you want a brand that's generally a safer bet, not perfect, but more honest, Patagonia is one of the best places to start. It's for people who want fewer pieces, better quality, and less "what am I funding" anxiety. Safe Brand 2. Pact. Pact is the brand for people who want the basics without the sketchy feeling. T-shirts, underwear, loungewear, the stuff that sits on your skin all day. And instead of chasing every micro trend, Pact keeps it simple. Comfortable everyday clothes with a stronger focus on being more responsible. Why does that matter? Because basics are the clothes you buy over and over again. If you're going to be repeated shopping anything, it might as well be from a brand that's at least trying not to cut every corner. Pact is also the type of brand that makes it easier to shop without feeling like you need to investigate a supply chain like you're in the FBI. It leans into fewer materials, fewer mystery fabrics, and a clearer message about how it wants its clothes made. So if your closet is built on everyday staples, tees, tanks, comfy sets, Pact is a safer brand because it's trying to slow the fast fashion chaos and give you something you can actually wear for a long time. Safe Brand 3. Girlfriend Collective. Girlfriend Collective is a safer pick if you love activewear. Leggings, sports bras, the stuff you sweat in and sit in and basically live in. The reason this matters is simple. Activewear is close contact clothing. It traps heat, sweat, and movement. So it's one of the categories where quality and materials matter a lot more than people admit. This brand built its reputation on making activewear with a more thoughtful approach, using recycled materials, being clearer about how things are produced, and not treating customers like they're dumb for asking questions. The overall vibe is less buy the newest drop and more, here's what we're making and why. Is it expensive? Sometimes yes, but for a safe list, you're usually picking brands that aren't racing to the bottom on price, because racing to the bottom is how you get the worst stories. So if you want leggings that don't feel like a gamble and a brand that isn't hiding behind mystery, Girlfriend Collective is a solid, safer option. Safe Brand 4. Levi's. Levi's is one of the safest mainstream brands to bet on for one simple reason. Their clothes are actually meant to survive real life. Like, not survive 2 washes and a bad day, but survive years of sitting, walking, bending, living. And when you're trying to avoid the sketchy side of fashion, Durability is underrated because the less often you replace your clothes, the less you feed the fast fashion machine. But here's what makes Levi's feel extra safe compared to a lot of big brands. They're not pretending every purchase needs to be brand new. Levi's has a secondhand program where you can buy pre-owned Levi's denim, and they describe it as a way to keep jeans in circulation and out of landfills. They also have a trade-in setup in select places where people can bring in certain Levi's denim items and get value back instead of tossing them. And that changes the whole relationship you have with your clothes. It turns jeans into something you keep, fix, pass on, and rewear, not something you wear 5 times and replace when the trend shifts. So, if you're someone who still wants a brand you can walk into at the mall and feel relatively safe, Levi's is a solid pick. Not because they're perfect, but because the brand's basics are built to last, and they're actually encouraging people to reuse, not just rebuy. Safe Brand 5, Eileen Fisher. Eileen Fisher is the opposite of haul culture. It's for people who want a closet that feels calm, pieces you wear again and again without them falling apart or going out of style in 5 minutes. But the biggest reason it lands on the safe list is what they do after you're done with the clothing. Eileen Fisher runs a take-back and resale program called Renew, where the company collects old Eileen Fisher items and then resells, remakes, donates, or repurposes them instead of letting them become trash. And this isn't some tiny pilot that exists only for good PR. The brand has said the Renew program has collected over 2 million garments. That matters because most clothing brands don't want to see their old stuff ever again. Once you buy it, it's your problem. Renew flips that. It's basically the brand saying, we'll take responsibility for what we put into the world. So, if you want a safe brand that feels more grown up and less chaotic, Eileen Fisher is a strong choice. It's not about perfect ethics. It's about a brand designed around longer wear, less waste, and an actual plan for clothes after you're done with them. So that's the takeaway. Some brands are risky because they're built on speed, shortcuts, and stories that don't match reality. And other brands are safer because they're clearer, sturdier, and actually designed to last past 2 wears and a TikTok trend. But here's the real power move. You don't have to shop perfectly. You just have to shop aware. Even swapping 1 or 2 brands in your rotation can make a difference for your skin, your wallet, and the kind of system you're supporting. Now I want to hear from you. Which brand on the never wear list surprised you the most, and which safe brand would you actually try? Drop it in the comments. And if you want more videos like this, more tea, more receipts, and more brands exposed, hit like, subscribe, and share this with a friend who thinks every $6 haul is basically free.